This girl was destined to be extraordinary from the moment she was born. On her first birthday, she didn't choose anything. She simply clung tightly to her father's hand. Seeing his daughter view him as her future, her father, a wealthy tycoon, was overcome with emotion and lifted her high into the air. Her two older brothers, witnessing this scene, realized that their lives would never be the same again. Such a young sister already knew how to rely on her father. Years later, Siri built her own successful company through her own hard work and determination. She was a cold-hearted workaholic. No matter what happened, she remained calm and composed. Even when rumors of an affair with a celebrity surfaced, her first thought wasn't to delete the rumors. Instead, she focused on the blurred parts of the photos. She instructed her assistant to contact the journalists to reveal the earrings she was wearing in the photos. This was because the earrings were the company's flagship product for the next quarter, and it was this move caused orders for her company's new product to skyrocket. In just a few days, she achieved half of the company's annual sales. Just as she was about to burst with excitement, her older brother, Jun, called, turning her life upside down once again. It turned out that her father, Peng, who had been arrested and imprisoned, had been released. He planned to announce the heir to the family conglomerate and demanded that Siri return home. At the family gathering, her father publicly announced that the heir to the family conglomerate was Siri. She felt as though she had reached the pinnacle of her life. Her two older brothers sitting beside her were in shock. They never imagined that their initial thoughts would come true. Their lives were about to become much more difficult. To prepare for the peak of her career, Siri decided to personally conduct quality tests for the company's new extreme sports product. After all, she would be very busy in the future. She might not have the chance to use the paragliding certificate she earned in Sweden. She confidently soared through the air. The photographer followed her, capturing her perfect form. But just as she was daydreaming about her future, she saw a tractor floating in midair. The sky suddenly darkened. She watched helplessly as a sudden tornado swept her photographer away. She was quickly sucked into the eye of the tornado. When she came to, she found herself in an uninhabited area. She tried to contact her assistant via walkie-talkie, but there was no signal. At that moment, North Korean officer Jang Hoon, who was patrolling nearby, heard her calls. He followed the sound to her location. Seeing someone approaching, Siri thought her father had called the army to rescue her. She waved excitedly at the officer, but when she saw the badge on his uniform, she froze in fear. Jang Hoon ordered her to get down from the tree immediately. Siri, seeing that he was a handsome man, pouted and said she couldn't get down. Jang Hoon, seeing this, cocked his gun. Siri, terrified, released the safety catch and lost her balance. Falling from the tree, she landed right on top of Jang Hoon. Siri explained that she had been blown there by a tornado. Seeing that her explanation made sense, Jang Hoon put away his gun and prepared to take her away. Siri then realized that she had been blown to North Korea by a tornado. She tried to use her charm to get away from Jang Hoon. While trying to escape, Jang Hoon told her she had entered a minefield. Scared, she stood in the river. Unable to move, Jang Hoon confidently claimed he was an expert on mines. Before he could finish speaking, he stepped on a mine himself. He tried to call for backup, but accidentally dropped the walkie-talkie into the river. Siri immediately picked up Jang Hoon's walkie-talkie and negotiated with him. Now, she was the only one who could help him. Just then, Jang Hoon's comrades arrived. Siri could only turn around and flee in panic. Jang Hoon, who had been rescued, called his team to start chasing Siri. Under the pursuit of the crowd, Siri escaped to another minefield. Facing the soldiers' warnings, she didn't hesitate and jumped up. Relying on her luck, she crossed the minefield. The soldiers signaled her that the direction she was running in was not back to South Korea. But when she saw the barbed wire in front of her, she thought the soldiers were deceiving her. Seeing someone raise a gun to shoot, she decisively climbed over the barbed wire and dodged the gunfire. On the other side of the barbed wire, a soldier on duty was so engrossed in a Korean drama that he completely ignored Siri's presence and let her continue running deeper into the forest. Siri ran desperately through the forest and finally reached a village at nightfall. Seeing hope of rescue, but when she entered the village, she realized she was still in North Korea. At that moment, a military vehicle approached from a distance. If the officer in the vehicle saw her, Siri would surely be killed. Suddenly, a figure pulled Siri away. When the lights in the courtyard came on, Siri realized that the person who had saved her was Jang Hoon. The courtyard she was in was Jang Hoon's home. Seeing a familiar face in this unfamiliar place, she felt inexplicably moved. In order to continue her escape, she tried to charm Jang Hoon again. However, Jang Hoon was contemplating whether to kill her. In the end, Jang Hoon took Siri into his home. The next morning, he even made breakfast for her. For safety reasons, Siri made an excuse for Jang Hoon to eat first. However, he saw right through her. Feeling embarrassed, she tried to persuade Jang Hoon to help her escape back to South Korea. She even offered several conditions that were impossible to refuse. But before she could convince Jang Hoon, there was a knock on the door. It was Jisoo, the man who had shot at Siri earlier. Jisoo excitedly told Jang Hoon that the Korean woman had been killed in a car accident the previous night. Everyone in their their team was safe. But before he could finish speaking, he was startled by Siri behind him. Siri recognized him as the man who had shot at her. Several other team members also ran over to tell Jang-hoon the good news, but Siri recognized them all. Siri threatened them with everything she knew and demanded that they help her return to South Korea. Ju-mo suggested that his uncle was a contact person who communicated with the outside world on the high seas. They could use this connection to get Siri on a boat out of North Korea. The earliest available boat was in 3 days. Everyone present agreed to the plan. Siri's assistant in South Korea was still desperately searching for her whereabouts. Her father had also mobilized his family's resources to find her. However, Siri's 2 older brothers and sister-in-law wanted her to disappear. Siri, who was temporarily staying at Jang-hoon's house, was not mistreated. She ate all the meat left in Jang-hoon's house. She also took a hot bath in Jang-hoon's house. But just as she finished bathing, the power suddenly went out. At that moment, there was a sound of someone opening the door outside. Scared, she grabbed a flower pot and threw it at the person. Fortunately, Jang-hoon was quick and dodged it. It turned out that she had been on the phone all day asking for scented candles, so Jang-hoon went out of his way to buy her some candles. Although they were just ordinary candles, they still warmed Siri's heart. Jang-hoon then told Siri that he had to go to Pyongyang on a business trip for a few days, and told her to stay home and take care of herself. He then gave her a large bag of daily necessities that he had bought for her on the black market. This made Siri feel that Jang-hoon was still very thoughtful. The next day, as soon as Jang-hoon arrived at the Pyongyang train station, he was suddenly stopped by soldiers and taken to an interrogation room. It turned out that the purpose of his trip to Pyongyang was to investigate the mysterious deaths of 3 cross-border tomb raiders he had previously captured. However, he was framed and taken away as a suspect. Fortunately, before the interrogation began, a high-ranking military officer happened to pass by the interrogation room and recognized Jang-hoon's identity. It turned out that Jang-hoon was the only son of the chief of the General Political Bureau. Meanwhile, at the 5th Company, Lieutenant Colonel Cheo-kan, upon learning of Jang-hoon's identity, immediately ordered a search of the officer's quarters. He had already discovered that Siri was hiding in Jang-hoon's home. He was the one who had framed Jang-hoon behind the scenes. Cheo-kan, on the surface, was a lieutenant colonel in the security department. In reality, he was involved in smuggling, drug trafficking, tomb raiding, and illegally hoarding troops, among other criminal activities, all for personal gain. He had even been discovered by Jang-hoon's older brother, Moo-hoo, who had uncovered evidence of these crimes. Therefore, he ordered his truck unit to run over Moo-hoo, who was on his way to Pyongyang, and kill him. He would stop at nothing to amass wealth and climb higher in the ranks. In his mind, no high-ranking official was untouchable. He had always viewed Jang-hoon, who was filled with a sense of justice, as a thorn in his side, because Jang-hoon had damaged his interests greatly. Upon learning that Jang-hoon was Moo-hoo's younger brother, his hatred for him grew even more intense. He swore to destroy the entire family of the director of the General Political Bureau. He knew there was another criminal record hidden by Moo-hoo. It must be related to Jang-hoon. When he arrived at Jang-hoon's house with his men, he noticed that the lights were on in a place where no one should have been. Without hesitation, he led his men inside to search the premises. One reason was to find the evidence he was seeking, and the other was to uncover Jang-hoon's weakness. To his surprise, he discovered Siri hidden in the cellar. Upon hearing the news, Jang-hoon immediately borrowed a car and rushed back. The car with the license plate starting with 729 was a vehicle reserved for high-ranking officials. It had the right to do anything on the road. No soldier dared to risk stopping it. At the critical moment, when Cheo-kan was about to execute Siri, Jang-hoon arrived just in time. Facing Cheo-kan and everyone else around him, Jang-hoon could only lie and say that Siri was his fiancée. But Cheo-kan still didn't believe him. He used his authority to demand that Siri show her Pyongyang resident ID. Seeing that he couldn't keep up the charade, Jang-hoon had no choice but to continue lying, claiming that Siri was a special agent sent by Division 11 to carry out a secret mission in South Korea. All information must be kept confidential. He spoke fluent Korean, which was necessary for his work. They were living together because she had just finished her mission and was too tired to go home. Siri even put on a performance to back up the story. This finally convinced Cheo-kan to drop the matter and let them go. However, this lie left the village women in an uproar. Such a handsome man like Jang-hoon actually had a fiancée. Shortly after Cheo-kan left, the women hurried over under the pretext of bringing gifts to take a look at Siri. When they saw Siri come out, they were filled with hostility. Siri, seeing this, could only pretend to be a mysterious agent and scare them away with a serious tone. But just as she was showing off her acting skills to Jang-hoon, she heard the women outside gossiping about how ugly she was. The next day, Siri decided to take revenge on everyone in the village, so she decided to show them her charm in the most beautiful way possible. Jang-hoon said that there were only 2 types of people who didn't tie their hair up in the families of military officers. One was foreigners, the other was crazy people. Siri would rather be considered crazy than lose face. Jang-hoon had no choice choice but to help Siri tie her hair up himself. The two even showed off their affection in public. This made all the women in the village view her as a rival. The scene returned to the Pyongyang airport on the night Siri was arrested. A woman slowly walked down the stairs of the plane. This woman was Jung-hoon's fiancée, Soo-dan. The high-ranking official who lent Jung-hoon the car was Soo-dan's uncle, Ming-soo. There was also a suitor, Soon-jun, who followed Soo-dan out of the airport lobby and was deeply attracted by her beauty. Upon arriving at the military base, Jung-hoon decided to handle the matter of Siri's departure more effectively. He left Ji-soo and the others behind. Upon learning that Jung-hoon had lied about Siri being his fiancée, they were all shocked. They never imagined that the upright Jung-hoon would resort to lying. After discussing the matter, Ji-soo and the others continued to pretend to go to Jung-hoon's house to repair the underground water pipes at Jung-hoon's orders, using the opportunity to protect Siri. At that moment, someone was installing eavesdropping equipment on a utility pole near Jung-hoon's house. This was the night Siri was captured. Cheol-kong had arranged this task after finding the eavesdropper Wan-bok. Wan-bok had revealed Moo-hoo's information to Cheol-kong through eavesdropping, leading to Moo-hoo's death. Jung-hoon arrived at the vehicle checkpoint to verify the traffic situation on the day the tomb raider was killed. He learned from the checkpoint commander that 3 heavy trucks had passed through the checkpoint. From this, he began to suspect that the military had secretly established a truck unit. Cheol-kong arrived at a mysterious luxury villa. The person living there was Soon-jun. It turned out that Soon-jun had defrauded Siri's older brother in South Korea. He was now being hunted down by Siri's older brother. He had no choice but to flee to North Korea for refuge. Cheol-kong was the officer who took his black money and sheltered him, but it was clear that Cheol-kong didn't care about Soon-chun's life or death. He told Soon-jun that he was both a businessman and a soldier. There were people in the world who were hunting him down. Even if he killed him, he could still get the money from others. He used this to intimidate Soon-jun into respecting him. In South Korea, Siri's older brother and second older brother are fighting for control of the family business. They want to declare Siri dead as soon as possible. To revoke her inheritance rights, they are exposing each other's secrets and hurting each other, which is causing their father, a wealthy tycoon, great distress. No one in the family cares about Siri's life or death. The only person who cares about Siri's life is her insurance agent, Soo-chan. For work-related reasons, he has collected a large amount of information in an effort to find her. A soldier repairing the plumbing at Jung-hoon's house encounters a thief stealing Jung-hoon's military uniform. Everyone chases after him and discovers it is a dirty, ragged child. Siri sees the child scavenging for scraps of food in the market and, out of kindness, takes some of the food from Jung-hoon's house to give to the child. Ji-soo warned her that the child might be deceiving her, but Siri still chose to help the child. The kind-hearted Jung-hoon also chose to support Siri. Jung-hoon's kind actions also touched Wan-bok, who was eavesdropping. To thank the soldiers for their help during this time, Siri held a special award ceremony for them. On the surface, everyone seemed disgusted, but deep down, they all hoped to win the grand prize. The award results were as follows. Yeon-tan won the Kindness Award. If Siri returns to South Korea, the prize is 100 million won. The prize can be claimed on-site as a sack of corn. Yeon-tan chose the sack of corn. Later, when he went to South Korea, he regretted his decision. Joo-mo won the favorite Korean drama award. The prize was either a television or a dinner with Cho Ji-woo. Joo-mo chose the dinner. Later, he fulfilled this wish. Kwon-bom won the Human Treasure Award. The reason for winning was simply because he was handsome. He refused all the prizes. Ji-soo, who didn't win any awards, received the leftover shampoo, conditioner, and body wash from Siri. In the end, Jung-hoon, who didn't win anything and even ended up paying for a bunch of things, stood aside feeling dejected. However, Siri had already prepared a special thank you award for him. The prize was a tomato seedling she had grown herself. This seedling was exchanged for half a bag of potatoes from Jung-hoon's family. Jung-hoon complained that Siri only knew how to make a loss, but deep down, he was secretly delighted. Time quickly came to the moment when Siri had to leave. Jung-hoon drove her to her destination. In the car, Siri folded the handkerchief Jung-hoon had used to tie her hair and returned it to him. She then said goodbye to him. Upon arriving at their destination, Jung-hoon gave the captain a phone card worth 20,000 won. He then accompanied the captain and Siri to the open sea to meet the contact person. However, halfway there, they were intercepted by the Coast Guard. It turned out that the military had just issued a maritime control order, completely prohibiting all maritime activities. Jung-hoon and Siri, hiding in the ship's hold, were worried that they would be discovered and something terrible would happen. With no other choice, Jung-hoon resorted to the most effective method he had learned from a Korean drama to avoid danger. This stunned the Coast Guard who came to inspect the ship. They had no choice but to admit that they were a couple who couldn't resist their feelings. With the captain's cover, the Coast Guard finally dropped their suspicions. However, after this incident, Siri's plan to return home was foiled. Angry, Siri decided to give up Jang Hoon's help. She left a note at Jang Hoon's house and left in the middle of the night. She changed back into her sportswear. She picked up the paraglider she had dropped. Siri planned to return to South Korea on her own. She tried using a walkie-talkie on the mountain. However, she still couldn't contact her subordinates. But this became the clue that led Cheokon to discover her true identity. Upon receiving the notification, Cheokon rushed to the mountain where Siri was with his troops. Jang Hoon, who arrived in a hurry, discovered that Siri had used the radio. He knew that the security department would arrive soon. Taking the normal path down the mountain would inevitably lead to capture. With no other option, he borrowed Siri's paraglider to escape. Cheokon, who failed to catch anyone, returned to the office in a rage. Upon hearing Wanbok say that Jang Hoon and Siri had returned home, he reignited his hope of finding evidence against them. He pulled out some money from his pocket and told Wanbok to go to the market to buy some meat for the children. On the surface, it was a reward for Wanbok, but in reality, he used this opportunity to reveal detailed information about Wanbok's children. He used this to threaten Wanbok into continuing to work for him. When Wanbok went to the market to buy meat, his wallet was snatched by robbers while he was paying. Jang Hoon, who was buying coffee beans nearby, immediately chased after them to help Wanbok retrieve his wallet. They chased them to the end but found that the robbers were well prepared. Seeing this, Jang Hoon quickly removed his belt from his shoulder and used it as a weapon. He quickly subdued the robbers. Just as one of the criminals got back up and prepared to attack again, Wanbok arrived in time to stop him. In this way, Jang Hoon helped Wanbok get his wallet back. Siri, who had returned to Jang Hoon's home, Jisoo and the others felt helpless. As they were chatting, they heard someone knocking on the door. It was Yone, the wife of the colonel, who was coming to celebrate her birthday. The People's Sergeant had come specially to ask Siri to prepare a gift to express her feelings. However, she was directly refused by Siri. She even closed the door, leaving the two of them helpless outside. Back at home, Siri lamented that Jang Hoon's rank was too low. He couldn't exercise his authority quickly to help her return to Korea. She hoped to find someone with more power. If that didn't work, she would help Jang Hoon find a way to promote quickly. However, this idea was met with unanimous criticism. But when she mentioned wanting to settle down here, Jisoo said there was a fast track to promotion by obtaining the favor medal, which would allow for special promotion outside of the regular promotion period. This medal is usually awarded by a colonel, but Jang Hoon, due to his straightforward nature, often offends the colonel, so this opportunity is unlikely to come his way. The best way to change the colonel's mind is through his wife. The colonel is known for being a henpecked husband, and Siri had just refused to attend the colonel's wife's birthday party. Cheokon, who had reviewed Jang Hoon's file, approached him. He hoped Cheokon could introduce him to Jang Hoon and apologize on his behalf. He was afraid of retaliation from the chief of political affairs, but Cheokon instead asked him to introduce him to his cousin, who works in the 3rd Division in Pyongyang. He wants to investigate whether Siri is really a secret agent from the 11th Division. Back in the village, all the women were already lined up with gifts, preparing to have their gifts inspected before attending the colonel's wife's birthday banquet. To help Jang Hoon obtain the meritorious service medal, Siri boldly joined the queue. The people's class leader, who was reviewing the gifts, was startled, but he still let her in. Under Youngie's guidance, Siri used her exceptional emotional intelligence to instantly win Youngie's favor. The people's class leader specifically reminded everyone that Siri hadn't brought a gift. Siri quickly grabbed a dress that someone else couldn't give away and used her professional skills to alter it into a retro-style lawn dress. She then gave an exaggerated introduction that left everyone speechless. To avoid being discovered, Siri even gave herself a new name, Yoon-soo. Before leaving, she praised Yone once more, making her very happy. She successfully entrusted Yone with the task of helping Jang Hoon obtain the merit badge. Jang Hoon knew she had come to the colonel's house to secure an opportunity for him. He deliberately rode his bike past the colonel's house repeatedly. Finally, he successfully created a chance encounter. He then returned home with Siri. On the same day, besides Siri attending the birthday party, Jang Hoon went to the engineering corps during the day to investigate vehicle information. He successfully found evidence of military personnel smuggling special steel from the engineering corps. Cheokon successfully contacted the section chief of Section 3 in the evening and bribed him to look up Siri's identity in Section 11. The next day, Jang Hoon used coffee beans he had bought from a special source and used the coffee pot he had used while studying abroad to make a delicious cup of coffee for Siri, fulfilling her dream of drinking coffee. This moved Siri deeply, and she gave him a heart gesture. However, Ju Mo explained that the heart gesture meant, "I love you." At that moment, inside the department store in Pyongyang, Sudan's mother, Ming-en, was inspecting the store. She was the director of the Pyongyang department store. Sudan changed into a beautiful outfit and prepared to meet her fiancé, Jang Hoon, in her best appearance. However, the taxi she had paid a high price for broke down in the middle of the journey. The driver left her alone to seek help. Soon-jun, who happened to be passing by, encountered Sudan again. He immediately offered her a helping hand. He took Sudan to Jang-hoon's house. This marked the beginning of their connection. Siri, however, had lost her way in the market after dark. Alone in the unfamiliar darkness, she recalled her tragic childhood experiences. It turned out she wasn't her mother's biological daughter. She was her father's illegitimate child from an affair. She was brought back home at birth and raised by a wealthy woman as her mother. The mother felt Siri's existence was a disgrace to her. She once secretly took Siri to the beach at night. She deceived Siri, promising she would return for her. She left her alone on the beach to wait. What she found was her mother's abandonment. It was only thanks to a kind stranger who happened to pass by that she survived. This incident left a deep psychological scar on her. Fortunately, Jang-hoon rushed to the market as soon as he heard the news. He held up the scented candles he had bought on the street, allowing Siri to find a glimmer of light in the unfamiliar darkness. This also made Siri begin to develop feelings for Jang-hoon. On Cho Kang's side, he confirmed that Siri was not a secret agent from Section 11. He planned to use this as leverage to bring down Jang-hoon and remove his father from his position as head of the General Political Bureau. This would allow him to secure a promotion. Jang-hoon walked Siri home. His mind was filled with the meaning of the heart gesture Jumo had told him, which meant "I love you." He confessed to Siri that he already had a fiancée and couldn't fall in love with her. Siri tried to argue, but on their way home, they passed by Soon-jun. However, Soon-jun wasn't sure it was Siri. For his own safety, he didn't call out to her. It turned out that he already knew Siri and had been engaged to her, but Siri had exposed him as a liar. So Soon-jun chose to steal her older brother's money and run away. He wasn't a bad person at heart and still had a good impression of Siri. After all, she was the only normal one among the three siblings. Jang-hoon was still explaining to Siri that his fiancée was studying abroad in Russia and wouldn't be returning anytime soon. Siri didn't need to worry about her suddenly showing up and exposing the truth. Just as they reached the front door, Jang-hoon saw his fiancée Sudan standing at his own front door waiting for him. This left everyone feeling awkward. Sudan spoke first to break the ice, saying she was there to take her uncle's car. Jang-hoon took the opportunity to make up an excuse, saying that Siri was his partner on a mission. Siri also followed Jang-hoon's lead and explained her identity. However, Sudan's cold attitude still made her a little unhappy. The ambiguity between the two of them made Sudan feel jealous. She began to fear that her fiancé would leave her. For Sudan's safety, Jang-hoon decided to take her with him and help her drive back to Pyongyang. From their conversation in the car, it was clear that Jang-hoon's feelings for Sudan were very shallow. The two had been arranged to be engaged by their parents. Meanwhile, Ming-en, who was unaware of the situation, was still worried about what to wear to meet her future son-in-law. She even insisted that her high-ranking brother must go downstairs to wait. He insisted on inviting Jang-hoon to their home for a meal. As a result, Jang-hoon was forced to have dinner at Sudan's house. After dinner, Jang-hoon returned to his own home. He stated that he was willing to marry Sudan as his father wished. However, he hoped his father could help him accomplish one thing. That thing was to arrange for Siri to join the national track and field team and participate in the international track and field competition, so that Siri could blend in with the national athletes and leave North Korea. At the same time in the village, Siri began to grow anxious because Jang-hoon had not returned yet. She paced restlessly around the house. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. She thought it was Jang-hoon returning. However, it was the village women who had come because they suspected Jang-hoon of infidelity. They brought food and beer to comfort Siri. They helped her scold Jang-hoon and told her not to be too upset, especially Yeon-ae, who was planning to ruin his career. Siri even began to worrying about herself. She could only make up a tragic love story between herself and Jang-hoon to move the women present. After sending the women away, Siri drank alone, waiting for Jang-hoon until dawn. Unable to contain her anger, she used a wide bottle to block Jang-hoon from entering the house. Jang-hoon reveals his plan to help Siri return to South Korea. They need to go to Pyongyang to get a passport for Siri. However, Pyongyang is different from the front lines. To avoid rousing suspicion, Siri must change her appearance. During the process of changing her appearance, Siri realizes she has no money. With no other choice, she went to a pawn shop to sell her watch, but she didn't know that the pawn shop priced items by weight. Her expensive limited edition watch was only worth 25,000 won, but she still sold it with a heavy heart and bought the most expensive dress at the market. Their plan to blend in with the national team and leave North Korea was overheard by Wan Bok, who reported it to Cho Kang. Cho Kang must find something to hold over them before they leave to threaten Jang-hoon. He used his authority to have Jisoo, Kwangbom, Ju Mo, and Youngtan all arrested and interrogated by the security department. Unfortunately, they couldn't get anything out of them. They even forced Jang Hoon to break into the security department. Cheo Kwan was summoned by the security command because of the report submitted by Jang Hoon. In the end, he had no choice but to let Jang Hoon leave. On her way home, Siri saw a child being bullied. She sighed that bullying was the same everywhere. She then stepped forward and taught the group of children a lesson. She rescued the bullied child. This child was Wanbok's son, Yu Bai. Siri felt very guilty. She wanted to give them gifts, but she didn't have any money, so she could only give them her love. This made everyone nervous. They didn't understand why Siri could express her love so freely. This was a betrayal of Jang Hoon. Jang Hoon was jealous and sent Siri a message full of anger. Jang Hoon jealously lashed out at Siri for no apparent reason. Even Siri herself couldn't figure out what was going on. The next day, Siri and Jang Hoon boarded a train bound for Pyongyang. Halfway through the journey, the train stopped due to a power outage. They were stuck for about 10 hours. Jang Hoon told Siri that it would normally take 13 to 16 hours. Siri, who had never encountered such a situation before, was terrified. They hadn't brought any supplies with them. Now, even eating was a problem. Then they saw a group of people running toward the train from a distance. It turned out that these people were merchants. They specialized in selling goods. When the train stopped, by nightfall, the temperature inside the train was lower than outside. They could build fires on the grass outside to keep warm. Everyone on the train went out to the grass to spend the night. The merchants provided them with hot water and food. The next day, the two finally arrived in North Korea. After taking her ID photo, Siri wanted to take a photo with Jang Hoon as a keepsake, but he refused. He felt they didn't need to have any further contact. However, the proud Jang Hoon secretly asked the staff for an extra copy of the photo after Siri left the photo studio to keep for himself. As soon as Siri stepped out of the photo studio, she was pulled away by Soon Jun, who had appeared at the Pyongyang Grand Hotel. It turned out that Siri's older brother, Si-hang, had found Soon Chun's whereabouts in South Korea. He had paid 10 times the price to bribe the people around him and was planning to send him back to South Korea. It was during his escape that he happened to come across Siri. He deduced the general reason why Siri was in North Korea through some probing. He planned to use the fact that Siri was still alive to threaten Si-hang. That's why he approached Siri. Seeing Siri being dragged into the elevator by a stranger, Jang Hoon immediately blocked the elevator and subdued Soon Jun. Siri lied, saying that Jang Hoon was her bodyguard. After exiting the elevator, Soon Jun noticed someone chasing after them. He arranged to meet Siri at a cafe at 7 p.m. He also gave Jang Hoon, who was posing as his bodyguard, a small tip. Then he got back into the elevator and fled. Jang Hoon desperately explained that he wasn't a bodyguard. However, every action he took unintentionally protected Siri. In South Korea, Suchin and group leader Han, through relentless efforts, finally located the wireless signal from the message Siri had sent from the mountain. However, the sound was very faint. They needed to send the audio file to the police station for voice recognition. This was the first lead since Siri went missing. Meanwhile, Soon Jun narrowly escaped the assassin's pursuit, but couldn't evade Mr. Sen, who was waiting at the elevator entrance with a gun. He was taken to the hotel rooftop for a remote interrogation by Si-hang. Mr. Sen held a gun to his head to prevent him from escaping. With no other options, Soon Jun had to negotiate with Si-hang using Siri. The result of the negotiation was that Soon Jun would repay half of the money. The other half would be offset by the information about Siri's survival. Meanwhile, Jang Hoon was still questioning Siri about Soon Chun's identity. Siri talked about her family and her engagement to Soon Jun. She lamented that growing up in a wealthy family, she had never known true family love, especially after she disappeared. Her two older brothers must have been overjoyed. Jang Hoon disagreed. He believed that family members were kind, but not everyone was as he described. Siri's second older brother later almost proved him wrong. When he was threatened, he didn't hesitate to betray Siri's life, even though he had initially cared about Siri's life. At that moment, a lady passed by the coffee shop and saw Siri and Jang Hoon talking. She immediately told Sudan, who was getting her hair done. Jang Hoon took Siri to the room where they were staying. As soon as he entered, he checked the room thoroughly. He found all the listening devices in the room and dismantled them to prevent any conversations from being leaked. Just as Jang Hoon was about to leave Siri's room, he encountered Sudan, who had arrived after receiving the news. Siri followed closely behind, which made Sudan very angry. But even though Sudan was so angry, she couldn't change Jang Hoon's indifference. To get back at Jang Hoon, she had her mom set up a dinner with Jang Hoon's parents, so Jang Hoon couldn't be with Siri. Heartbroken, Sudan went to the rooftop to calm down and ran into Soon Jun, who had just been released. The two started talking, and Soon Jun analyzed male-female relationships for Sudan for the first time, and slowly became her emotional advisor. Sudan explains the meaning of life to Soon Jun, and begins to rely on him. The two shake hands for the first time, and introduce themselves to each other. At 7 p.m., Siri arrives at the hotel cafe to meet Soon Jun. This scene is witnessed by Sudan, who has come to attend the banquet. All of Soon Chun's lies are exposed in front of everyone. This leaves Soon Jun at a loss. However, their meeting is secretly photographed by Soon-jun and Mr. Sen, who then send the photos to Si-hang. This gave Soon-jun a trump card to protect himself. Meanwhile, at the banquet between Jang-hoon and Soo-don's families, Ming-nen vented her frustration over Jang-hoon and Soo-don's delay in getting married. Jang-hoon's father, Jun-ryul, seeing this, decided to set the wedding date for the last Saturday of next month. On the other side, Soon-jun and Siri were taking a walk together, but Soon-jun was secretly recording their conversation on his phone and sending it to Si-han, making Si-han even more afraid to harm himself. But Siri knew that Soon-jun was not a bad person at heart. She hoped that Soon-jun would tell his family about her. After finishing the dinner, Jang-hoon saw the two of them walking on the street and was very unhappy. When he sees the two suddenly disappear, he rushes to find them. Siri and Soon-jun are by the river. Using English to fool their North Korean supervisor, the two realize that North Korea and South Korea are the same in that they both fear people who speak English. Jang-hoon finds the two and demands that Siri come with him. After learning that Siri had given Soon-jun her phone number so he could contact her anytime, Jang-hoon was very upset and said a lot. This made Siri feel that Jang-hoon was probably starting to like her. On the other side, Si-hang, who had learned about Siri's situation, did not want her to return to South Korea. He instructed Mr. Woo to tell Mr. Sen and Soon-jun to use any means necessary to ensure that Siri remained in North Korea permanently. Of course, her life must not be harmed. Soon-jun, however, revealed this information to Cheol-kan. This made Cheol-kan, who knew that Siri was leaving North Korea on Thursday, start to scheme. Cheol-kan had been arrested by the security bureau earlier, yet he was now able to appear at Soon-chun's villa. This was because he had been secretly bribing officials at all levels. When he faced the inspector general, he casually revealed that he had bribed him to help his daughter purchase a $10 million apartment, and that he still had evidence of the bribery. Whether it was the inspector general or other officials, including high-ranking officials, they had all been bribed by him. He could take them all down with him at any time. By threatening the inspector general, he successfully had his criminal record erased and successfully left the security bureau. On the other side, Siri returned to the village to bid farewell to the women. Her tragic love story with Jang-hoon brought tears to the women's eyes. They only hoped that she would have a bright future after leaving. Cheol-kong found Wan-bok and demanded that he provide Siri's itinerary. That night, Siri and the fifth squad ate instant noodles at home. To celebrate her upcoming departure, Siri suggested that everyone go on a picnic, but Jisoo strongly opposed the idea. However, on the day of the picnic, Jisoo became the most enthusiastic participant. After everyone had eaten their fill, they held a farewell ceremony for Siri, but Jang-hoon never showed up. At that moment, he was at the engineering department preparing his motorcycle. He then went to the armory to pick up weapons and equipment. He arranged for Kwon-bom to drive Siri to the airport on Thursday. He would follow behind to prevent any accidents. Time once again came for Siri to leave. Upon learning that Jang-hoon wasn't going to send her to the airport himself, Siri felt instantly dejected. After all, the two of them might never see each other again. Wan-bok, who was eavesdropping, was moved by their feelings. However, he still told Cheol-kan that Siri had already left, because his family was still in Cheol-kang's hands. On the way to the airport, the thing Jang-hoon feared most happened. Suddenly, two armored trucks made of special steel appeared on the empty road. One was chasing them from behind, and the other was blocking their path ahead, attempting to surround them. At the critical moment, Jang-hoon, who had been lurking behind them, appeared on his motorcycle and engaged the trucks in battle. After successfully intercepting one truck, he was unable to stop the other. Siri and Kwon-bom were about to be run over by the armored trucks. Jang-hoon disregarded his own safety, throwing his motorcycle in front of the truck to block it. He then fired at the grenade bag on the truck, hitting it. Using the explosion of the grenade, he successfully intercepted the last truck. However, the people on the truck were not giving up. They got out of the truck, armed with guns, preparing to ambush Jang-hoon and Siri, who had just reunited. To protect Siri, Jang-hoon chose to use his own body to block the bullets for her. Despite her severe injuries, she insisted on firing the final shot to kill the murderer. Faced with the choice between her lover and returning home, Siri gave up her hope of returning home. She drove the car, carrying the injured Jang-hoon and Kwon-bom to the nearest hospital, Sheriwon. Jang-hoon needed surgery immediately, but the hospital was running out of blood bags. Upon learning that Jang-hoon is type O blood, Siri, who is also type O, immediately donates blood for him, in the hope of saving Jang-hoon's life as soon as possible. The time spent donating blood means she can no longer return to South Korea. Upon hearing the news, Cheol-kan immediately suspected Jang-hoon was behind it. He used his authority to track down Jang-hoon's whereabouts, and ordered his subordinates to check the armory to see if Jang-hoon had retrieved any weapons. He would not let any opportunity to bring down the Jang-hoon family slip through his fingers. While anxiously waiting for the surgery, Siri found the photo Jang-hoon had secretly kept kept as a memento in his clothes. At that moment, she finally realized that Jang-hoon had also been in love with her. Thanks to the doctor's efforts, Jang-hoon successfully underwent the surgery without any major complications. However, he remained unconscious due to severe blood loss. The doctor also advised Siri to talk to Jang-hoon frequently to help him wake up. Having never experienced such a situation before, Siri could only talk to Jang-hoon about the little things they had experienced together. In Jang-hoon's dream, he was in Switzerland, playing his last performance after learning of his brother's death. That was the first time he had ever felt so heartbroken. Perhaps the pain of losing his brother made Jang-hoon unwilling to lose another important person. He slowly opened his eyes. He saw that Siri had not left safely as they had agreed. Overwhelmed with worrying for Siri, he said something that broke her heart. Siri could only leave the ward silently, tears streaming down her face. She found a quiet place to cry alone until the doctor appeared. Jang-hoon learned from the doctor and nurses that it was Siri who donated blood to save him. It was also Siri who stayed by his side while he was unconscious. Jang-hoon then found Siri crying alone. At that moment, he didn't want to care about the trivial worries of the world. He kissed Siri deeply, expressing his love for her with the most direct action. Even the nurses envied their love the next day, although this was not in line with the relatively conservative gender relations in North Korea. At the same time, Cheol-kong found Jang-hoon's weapon registration documents. He confirmed that it was Jang-hoon who had been in a gunfight with the armored truck. Since he hadn't returned to the unit, he must have been injured and hiding in a hospital for treatment. He ordered all members of the security department to stand by. They were to search all medical institutions within a radius of the shooting location for Jang-hoon's whereabouts. Finally, they found Jang-hoon at Sherry-won Hospital. He immediately ordered the security department to gather their men and go arrest Jang-hoon. Meanwhile, Soo-dang and her mother arrived at the village. Yeon-ae and the People's Squad leader decided to avenge Siri. However, despite their aggressive stance, they were defeated by Mingyen's skincare product bribery. On the other side, Jang-hoon was worried that Siri would be cold at night and asked her to sleep with him in the bed. In reality, he quietly got up after Siri fell asleep and gave her the entire bed. Jang-hoon looked at Siri with eyes full of love. The next day, Siri secretly called Soon-jun to ask if he had helped her contact her father. However, Soon-jun did not reveal anything over the phone. He only asked for Siri's location and said they would discuss it in person. After hanging up, Siri turns around and sees Cheol-kong arriving at the hospital with soldiers. She dares not make a move. She can only sneak in to see what's going on. The first thing Cheol-kong does when he arrives at the hospital is to question Jang-hoon about why he is protecting a South Korean spy who shot a soldier from the engineering corps. Jang-hoon refutes all of his accusations with evidence. Unable to control himself, he tried to drag Jang-hoon back to the security department for questioning. At that moment, a voice outside the door startled him. It was Jang-hoon's father, the director of the General Political Bureau, who had personally come to the hospital to visit his son. Cheol-kong, who had been humiliated, could only swallow his anger and leave with his troops. Jang-hoon was questioned by his father in the hospital room. His father, who was in a high position, was afraid that his political enemies would attack him and could only ask his family to be careful. Even so, he still lost a son, which made him even more cautious. However, the arrival of the chief of the General Political Bureau still caused a stir in the entire hospital. Everyone was discussing Jang-hoon's identity. As a result, Siri, who was secretly gathering information, saw Soo-dang and her mother rushing to the hospital room. She could only find a girl at random to use as a cover. After Soon-jun arrived, she secretly left the hospital in his car. Upon arriving at the ward, Mingyen's first action was to check if Jang-hoon had any disabilities. However, Soo-dang noticed the heart-shaped pattern Siri had sewn onto Jang-hoon's military uniform. After both sets of parents left, Soo-dang could no longer suppress her anger. She confronted Jang-hoon and demanded to know what was going on. Jang-hoon calmly confessed his love for Siri to Soo-dang, but Soo-dang didn't believe that Jang-hoon truly loved Siri. Siri, who had followed Soon-jun back to the villa, learned from him that he had contacted her family through a friend abroad. However, due to certain circumstances, she couldn't return to Korea. Soon-jun also mentioned how much Siri's family cared about her and promised to arrange for her to secretly return to Korea at the right time. Her family had even postponed the shareholders meeting for her. However, in Korea, Siri's father had already convened the shareholders meeting and announced her death to the public. He also announced that the family group's operational control would ultimately be handed over to Si-hang. To make Jang-hoon give up on Siri, Soo-dang decided to immediately begin customizing a wedding dress. In a foreign magazine provided by the wedding dress shop owner, she discovered Siri's true identity. She realized the outcome of Jang-hoon continuing down this path. She tore out the page introducing Siri and rushed back to the hospital, but saw Jang-hoon, who had changed clothes and was preparing to leave the hospital. It turned out that Jang-hoon had discovered Siri's sudden disappearance from the hospital. He used his identity as the son of the head of the General Political Bureau to investigate the hospital's surveillance footage. He found out that Siri had gotten into Sun Chun's car and left. Through Sudan's uncle, he also tracked down Sun Chun's approximate location. He had to go find Siri. Sudan desperately tried to persuade him, and even told him she would report their relationship to the security department, but she couldn't stop Jang-hoon from leaving. Sudan angrily walked to the phone booth to make the report, but looking at the phone number on the wall, she chose to give up. Deep down, she still believed she loved Jang-hoon. At the villa, Siri wanted to borrow Sun Chun's phone to contact Jang-hoon, but Sun Jun refused. He clearly explained Jang-hoon's current situation to Siri. Because he had sheltered Siri, Jang-hoon would face difficulties that couldn't be simply explained away. The most severe consequence could be that Jang-hoon would lose his life. After considering the consequences, Siri decided to end her relationship with Jang-hoon. The reason Sun Jun did this was not only to keep his promise to Si-hang not to let Siri return to South Korea, but also to help Sudan complete her wedding. The next day, Sudan found Sun Jun and once again asked him to confirm Siri's true identity. Sun Jun confessed everything without hesitation, but stopped Sudan from reporting it. When Sun Jun returned to the villa, Siri brought him and Mr. Sen together for a meeting and demanded that they each come up with a plan on how to quickly send her back to South Korea. Sun Jun suggested that Siri marry him in a sham marriage and then use his British citizenship to return to Europe and from there back to South Korea. However, Siri was not very keen on the idea of a sham marriage and could only return to her room to think about it for a while. That night, Jang-hoon finally managed to locate Siri. He sneaked in alone and cut off the power to the villa. Then, despite his injuries, he struggled to knock down one guard after another. Seeing Jang-hoon risking his life for her, Siri wanted to rush out to meet him. Seun Ji-jun once again warned Siri of the consequences of leaving. He even revealed that Sudan knew Siri's true identity, which finally made Siri resolve to leave Jang-hoon. But she couldn't just let Jang-hoon continue fighting with the guards outside. She walked out of the villa and saw Jang-hoon. Jang-hoon's mind was still only on her safety, but she didn't want Jang-hoon to continue putting himself in danger for her. She could only tell Jang-hoon that she had agreed to Sun Chun's marriage proposal. Sun Jun had also proposed to her, hoping that Jang-hoon would let them go. They had never been meant to be together. There was no love between them, but the terror she left behind made Jang-hoon realize that everything she said was just an excuse. But to prevent her from continuing to dwell on it, Jang-hoon pretended to understand her meaning and left alone in silence. Siri couldn't bear to let Jang-hoon, who had just recovered from his injuries, leave alone in the snow. She got into Sun Chun's car to go find him, hoping to take him to a safe place. Jang-hoon tightly embraced Siri in his arms. Back in the car, Siri still insisted she wouldn't go with him, but fate had other plans for them. Just as Siri was about to start the car, she realized it was out of gas. With no other choice, they temporarily found an abandoned school and lit a stove to keep warm. The two cleared up the misunderstanding between them while chatting. Cheo Kong successfully bribed another high-ranking official who was a political enemy of the chief of the General Political Bureau and connected with the military minister of the Central Committee. This minister had always wanted to overthrow Jung Ryul and take his place as chief of the General Political Bureau. Cheo Kong reported to him that he had evidence of the General Political Bureau director's son's crimes. If they could frame the entire family as spies, they could easily bring down the General Political Bureau director. This made the military minister somewhat tempted. He decided to support Cheo Kang's efforts. With the support, Cheo Kong immediately led his troops to Cheryuan to arrest Jang-hoon. However, they received news that Jang-hoon had already been discharged from the hospital. He could only order his subordinates to point their guns at the hospital director and demand the reason for Jang-hoon's sudden discharge. From the information pointed out by the director in the surveillance footage, they discovered that Siri had actually been taken away by Sun Jun. He was greatly surprised. In the late-night village, Wanbok sat alone at his front door drinking. His wife asked him and learned the reason for his sadness. It turned out that his real job was a wiretapper. He would monitor frontline officers according to national requirements. Cheo Kong had threatened him using the fact that his mother was imprisoned for smuggling to force him to monitor Moo-hoo's situation. Under Cheo Kang's coercion, he indirectly caused Moo-hoo's death, and Moo-hoo was the only person in the village who knew he was a wiretapper yet still respected him. He had once saved him when he was being beaten, and even saved his son when he was just born, yet he had caused his death. This incident had left him deeply guilt-ridden. Now Cheo Kong is threatening him again, using his family to force him to spy on Jang-hoon, and Jang-hoon is Moo-hoo's younger brother. This is causing him immense pain. After dawn, Sudan arrived at Jang-hoon's home. She chose not to use Siri to report Jang-hoon's family. Instead, she told Jang-hoon's father everything about Siri. She hoped that Jang-hoon's father would help him return to the right path. Cheo Kong, meanwhile, brought men to the villa where Sun Jun was staying to search for Siri. He warned Sun Jun not to interfere with his plans. Fortunately, Siri left and did not return to the villa. She and Jang-hoon hitched a ride on a passing truck back to the village. Sudan returned home to find her mother finally sober from her hangover. It turned out that her mother had noticed the subtle feelings feelings between Sudan and Jang-hoon. She went to Jang-hoon's house to entertain Jisoo and the others. She hoped to extract some useful information from them. At the banquet, she targeted Jisoo as the best breakthrough. She tried desperately to get Jisoo drunk. As a result, after drinking a few glasses of wine, Jisoo revealed everything about Siri and Jang-hoon. No matter how Kwanbon and the others hinted and tried to stop him, it was useless. Jisoo was afraid that Ming-en would forget, so he specifically reminded her to take notes. Unfortunately, after Ming-en sobered up, she not only forgot what Jisoo had said, but also completely forgot what the information written on her hand meant. All their hard work was in vain. On the other side, Wanbok, who overheard Jang-hoon and Siri safely returning to the village, was genuinely happy for them. After receiving a call from Cheokon asking about the situation, he chose to defy Cheokon for the first time. He didn't tell him that Jang-hoon had returned to the village. Siri, who had returned to the village, wanted to give everyone a gift. Yeon-ae was the first to think that she had no money, but Siri raised her hand and revealed a precious diamond ring. It turned out that she had already planned to pawn the engagement ring Soon-jun had given her to raise money. As Siri highlighted the value of the diamond ring, the shop owner brought out all his savings 140,000 won and told her he couldn't afford such an expensive diamond ring. In the end, the class president secretly told the boss that Siri had mental illness and asked him to make an exception, so she was able to sell the diamond ring. Everyone chose a gift they liked. Siri used the remaining money to buy an expensive watch from the pawn shop to give to Jang-hoon as a Christmas gift. This watch was the one Jang-hoon had bought for his brother with his scholarship money. Moo-hoo's other piece of evidence was hidden inside the watch. Siri happily returned to Jang-hoon's home with the watch, but was suddenly kidnapped by two strangers halfway there. The watch she had planned to give to Jang-hoon fell to the ground. The kidnappers demanded that Siri call Jang-hoon and tell him that her family had come to take her back to Korea. Jang-hoon answered the call and began searching for Siri's location, but the call ended with a gunshot. That night, while searching for Siri, Jang-hoon suddenly received a call from Yeon-ae saying that security personnel were searching his home and told him to hurry home. Jang-hoon rushed back home and saw the tomato planter knocked over on the ground. Just as he was about to pick it up, Cheokon came out of the house. Cheokon demanded to know where Siri was. He arrogantly stated that if he caught Siri, he would torture her mercilessly. Unable to take it anymore, Jang-hoon punched him. He intended to beat him up, but was instead pulled away by Cheokang's bodyguards and beaten himself. Cheokon personally handcuffed Jang-hoon. Meanwhile, Siri woke up to find herself locked in a room. There was a surveillance camera monitoring her every move. Jisoo and the others arrived at the prison to visit Jang-hoon. Jang-hoon asked them to do two things for him. The first was to contact Sudan for him. He wanted to ask her for help. The second was to pretend to accidentally let the entire army know his true identity. He wanted his identity as the son of the director of the General Political Bureau to be spread throughout the village. He wanted to use this identity to gain some advantages. Soon, Sudan arrived at the prison after being notified by Jisoo. She was also saddened to find out that Jang-hoon had requested to see her for the first time in a detention cell. However, she was relieved that Hyo would remain in prison until his wedding day and would no longer have any contact with Siri. Little did he know that Jang-hoon had already guessed that Siri's kidnapping was related to her. He directly addressed the issue. Judging from the behavior of the security department, it was clear that Sudan had not reported their family. Ming-en was also incapable of kidnapping someone. The only possibility was that Sudan had gone to her father for help. An angry Sudan bluntly revealed the truth. She told Jang-hoon not to think about finding Siri anymore. They would never see each other again in this lifetime. This statement made Jang-hoon fear that his father would kill Siri. It also completely ignited the conflict between him and Sudan. He told Sudan to tell her father that if anything happened to Siri, he would lose his only remaining son. This statement was not only a threat to his father, but also broke Sudan's heart. She couldn't understand why Jang-hoon didn't like her. Yubai found the gift Siri had prepared for Jang-hoon and went to her father. It turned out that on the day Siri was kidnapped, he had seen everything from a distance and discovered this abandoned gift box. He was afraid something had happened to Siri, so he brought the gift box to ask his father for help. Wanbok opened the gift box and found that it was the watch that Cheokon had been looking for, the one that had disappeared. He quickly hid the watch in his pocket. Then he told his son not to tell anyone about it. Siri was brought before Junrail. She rarely showed her strongest side. She started talking to Junrail in a tough manner, but she mistook Junrail for Sudan's father. Siri hoped that Junrail could help her and offered him a large sum of money. This left Junrail speechless. He then had her dragged away. However, Yoon-hee, Jang-hoon's mother, who had been hiding behind the wall and listening to everything, had a different opinion of Siri. Out of love for her son, she also wanted to get to know this stranger who had put their family in danger. Because she was also the woman her son liked, unable to bear seeing Siri suffering in the basement, Yoon-hee brought her to Jang-hoon's room hoping she could rest. Looking at the style of this unfamiliar room, Siri finally realized where she was. The woman in front of her was Jang-hoon's mother, and the man she had mistaken for Jang-hoon was actually his father. Siri, who was resting alone in Jang-hoon's room, couldn't sleep. She began to explore Jang-hoon's past in his room. Jang-hoon's identity as the son of the director of the General Political Bureau had been spread by Jisoo and others. Yeon-ae, who was sharp-witted, returned home and was furious upon seeing the colonel. The colonel, who was on the phone, received news that a soldier had deserted. He needed to organize a squad to pursue the deserter. After hanging up the phone, the colonel was immediately scolded by his wife. He had been gloating that Jang-hoon had finally been taught a lesson, but after learning about Jang-hoon's background, he immediately backed down. The next day, he immediately entered the military detention center and found the warden, asking him to release Jang-hoon immediately. At first, the warden pretended to be righteous and refused, but when he learned Jang-hoon's true identity, he immediately changed his attitude and defended Jang-hoon. He successfully had Jang-hoon released without charge. The major personally picked Jang-hoon up from the prison. He also told Jang-hoon to come to him for help if he ever needed it. Jang-hoon immediately asked him for a favor. This was also part of his plan to send Siri home. At Jang-hoon's house, Siri was enjoying the noodles Yoon-hee had made for her. She remarked that Jang-hoon had inherited his mother's cooking skills. Jang-hoon's mother was also surprised that someone had complimented her son's warm personality. Siri had indirectly gained Yoon-hee's approval. Jang-hoon rushed home in a hurry. As soon as he saw his father, he began to question him about where Siri was. Every hurtful word pierced Jung-ryul's heart. It reminded him of the death of his other son, Moo-hoo. Every word Jang-hoon spoke also pierced the hearts of his mother and Siri, who were hiding in the house. Hearing her son's heartfelt words, the mother could no longer bear it and rushed out to tell her son to face his life boldly, and pulled Siri out to meet him. The two, who had not seen each other for a long time, expressed their longing and concern for each other. On the contrary, Jung-ryul, seeing this situation, knew that everything Sudan had said was true, which made him very headache, but he was also relieved that his child's heart had a new place to rest, and could slowly move on from the pain of his brother's death. The heartbroken Sudan drinks alone in a hotel, and once again runs into Seung-jun, who is also alone. She confides in Seung-jun about her feelings of resentment. It turns out that she and Jang-hoon were alumni of the same middle school. The two had no connection at first. It was only after Sudan saw Jang-hoon playing basketball and learned of his excellence that she began to develop feelings for him. The two often crossed paths at school. Sudan, who was secretly in love with Jang-hoon, would always watch him silently, but it wasn't until many years after graduation that the two families arranged their marriage. Sudan went to Switzerland to find Jang-hoon, who was studying abroad. Jang-hoon's first words upon meeting her made Sudan realize that she had never been in his eyes. Jang-hoon's cold attitude throughout her time in Switzerland also broke her heart, but she refused to give up. She believed that if she tried harder, she could win Jang-hoon's affection. However, all the love she had poured into him was now lost to Siri, who had only recently entered his life. Seung-jun comforted Sudan, telling her not to take love too seriously, but Sudan, who was slightly intoxicated, revealed her more uninhibited side to Seung-jun. Feeling sorry for Sudan, Seung-jun confessed his feelings for her for the first time. Seung-jun then carried the drunk Sudan back to her home. This scared Ming-en. At that moment, Seung-jun received a call from Jang-hoon. He asked him to drive to his house and help him take Siri away, because Siri's presence would definitely lead Cheo-kong to his house. Using a military vehicle would also be discovered. Only Seung-jun was the most suitable person to help them. He didn't want to involve his father's connections. Knowing that Jang-hoon had always wanted to become a pianist, Siri boldly asked him about a piece of music. She had heard it by chance in Switzerland, but after searching for a long time, she couldn't find the name or composer of the piece. When the music began to play, it instantly touched Jang-hoon's heart. It turned out to be the piece Jang-hoon had written for his older brother. He had played it for the first and last time in Switzerland upon learning of his brother's death. Before returning to North Korea, he had played it by the lake in Iserwald. His sorrowful performance had drawn the attention of Siri, who was preparing to jump into the lake from a distant boat, indirectly saving Siri's life. Moved, Siri thanked Jang-hoon for saving her. Jang-hoon told her she could go home the next day. The next day, Cheo-kong found the military minister. He told him about his investigation, which suggested that Siri might be hiding at the home of the director of the General Political Bureau. He hoped the minister could assist him. The military minister, deeming it feasible, used his authority to bring Cheo-kong and the security bureau to Jang-hoon's home. Cheo-kong used the military minister's search warrant to conduct a thorough search of the General Political Bureau director's residence. Unfortunately, they found nothing. They also learned reported from Jung Ryal about the urgent shift change at the front lines. Cheo Kong immediately realized that Jang Hoon must have planned to use the urgent shift change to send Siri back to South Korea. But it was too late, having caused the military minister to lose face in front of the director of the General Political Bureau. He had no chance left. Not only had he lost the military minister's trust, but he was also about to be detained by the military minister for providing false intelligence. Jang Hoon indeed planned to use the emergency handover to take Siri back to the forward base. He intended to send Siri home within his own territory. The emergency handover of his platoon was the favor he had previously asked the major. Jang Hoon left his home before Cheo Kong arrived. Following the plan he had previously arranged with Soon Jun, he rode in Soon Chun's car to the outpost area to meet up with Kwon Bon and head to the front lines. In the car, Soon Jun sadly learned that Siri had sold his engagement ring. That night, Jang Hoon took Siri along the border to begin her journey home. Unable to bear the separation, Jang Hoon used the excuse that he had poor night vision and forced Siri to accompany him on a few extra laps until dawn. When he finally brought her to the border crossing, Jang Hoon, who was not supposed to cross the border, boldly stepped over it for the woman he loved. The two embraced and kissed passionately, as if it were their last goodbye. Siri returned to South Korea with a sense of power and attended her own memorial service downstairs at her company. She carefully checked who had come to mourn her. She also criticized her subordinates for choosing such an ugly photo as her portrait. When she took off her sunglasses, she nearly scared everyone present. She told everyone to spread the news that she had returned safely. She also announced on the spot that, to comfort everyone's hearts, the company launched a week-long half-price sale on all its products, so everyone could enjoy the best products. Upon hearing the news that Siri was still alive, the happiest person was Soo Chan, originally facing unemployment due to Siri's death. He finally stood tall again at the company. Earlier, he and group leader Han had found a recording proving Siri was alive and went to see Si-hang to tell their father. However, they were driven away by Si-hang. Fortunately, the chairman appeared at the last moment, allowing the news to spread. After Siri crossed the border, the chairman personally went to bring her home. However, the series of unusual events after Siri returned to South Korea left group leader Han in constant fear. She then went to the conference room to pack her things, intending to take over the company from her second sister-in-law. She changed her usual demeanor and told all the executives present to return to work. She stated that she would not hold them accountable for agreeing to sell the company. She then turned to her second sister-in-law and mocked her harshly. This left the second sister-in-law feeling utterly terrified. Jang Hoon, who was suffering from separation anxiety, spent the day alone without Siri. On his way back to the office in the evening, he discovered Wan Bok, who had come to find him secretly. Wan Bok handed Jang Hoon the letter Moo Hoo had written to him, and spoke of Moo Hoo's kindness toward him, proving his determination to help Jang Hoon. He then handed Jang Hoon Moo Hoo's watch and the recording of his death, and told Jang Hoon everything Cheo Kong had done. He revealed the truth behind Moo Hoo's death. He truly did not want to go against his conscience and harm someone who respected him. He only hoped that Jang Hoon would allow him to atone for his sins. He was willing to accept any punishment. He only begged for mercy for his family. The kind-hearted Jang Hoon did not hold Wan Bok accountable. After he left, he listened to the recording of his brother praising him and wept uncontrollably. After composing himself, Jang Hoon opened his brother's watch and removed the memory card inside. In the files on the memory card, he found all the evidence of Cheo Kang's smuggling, kidnapping, and maintaining an army. He did not act impulsively to report it. Instead, he sent all the information to his father to handle the matter. Siri rarely returned to her father's home just to talk to her mother, because her mother was the second largest shareholder of her company after she went missing. She hoped her mother would stop harboring any ill intentions, but her mother had her own unspeakable sorrows. She felt nothing but guilt towards Siri. She wanted to make amends, but every time she saw Siri, she couldn't bring herself to speak. They could only let the misunderstanding deepen between them. The People's Squad leader went out to fetch rice. In the rice jar, he found the farewell letter Siri had left for the women's team. The women's team finally learned Siri's true identity. They were a bit afraid but also worried about Siri. It turned out that Siri had been living cautiously among them all along. Sudan accidentally saved Soon Jun, who was being taken away by the security department at the hotel. In a slip of the tongue, Soon Jun reveals everything he did to help Jang Hoon to Sudan. Sudan learns that Jang Hoon delayed his wedding again and entered the DMZ all for Siri. He even risked everything for power. This undoubtedly breaks Sudan's heart once more. Seeing Sudan in pain, Soon Jun explains that helping Jang Hoon was also a way of helping her. Sudan said she wouldn't give up easily, but Soon Chun's words shook her resolve. Mingnen began to worrying about Sudan's love life because of Soon Chun's appearance. She said that if Sudan found someone else who could make her happier, she would not hesitate to ask Jang Hoon's family to call off the engagement. At the military court, Cheo Kang Kang's crimes were exposed one by one. He tried to argue that he didn't know the truck drivers, but Jang Hoon presented the special steel he had secretly collected. These were also the items he had been asking Soo-don's uncle to investigate. From the beginning, he didn't believe his brother had died in an accident. Cheon-kan, whose crimes were exposed, tried to drag Jang Hoon down by accusing him of harboring Siri, but the prosecutor no longer trusted him and directly sentenced him to life imprisonment. He was furious and wanted to take revenge on Jang Hoon, but was stopped by soldiers and could only tell Jang Hoon that he had missed one crucial piece of information. He vowed that he would not let Siri off the hook. Back at the military camp, Jang Hoon compared all the evidence with the list of seized steel materials. Finally, he figured out what Cheon-kan had said he had missed. That thing was currently on its way to the prison where Cheon-kan was being taken. It was a hidden armored truck. Cheon-kan used his most skilled method to help himself escape. After escaping, he sent Jang Hoon a letter. Inside was an article about Siri. Then he called Jang Hoon. He used Moo-hoo's death and Siri's provocation against him to swear that he would make Jang Hoon lose everything. That night, Siri finished work at the company and was preparing to go home. Cheon-kan had been following her unnoticed. Fortunately, two security guards happened to pass by and prevented him from succeeding. At that moment, Wan-bok, Ji-soo, and the others were suddenly taken to a mysterious place. The person who came to meet them was Jang Hoon's father. It turned out that after receiving Cheon-kang's call, Jang Hoon had immediately found the escape route to South Korea. It was a tunnel left over from the metallurgy period, only allowing one person to pass through. He rushed into the tunnel alone, heading for South Korea. Jun Ryul found that, in the hope that they could help him go to South Korea and bring Jang Hoon back to North Korea, to avoid unnecessary conflict between the two countries. At that moment, Jang Hoon had already met Siri in South Korea. Under Siri's persistent questioning, Jang Hoon told her the reason he had come to South Korea because of Cheon-kan. To prevent Jang Hoon from being exposed, Siri could only take him back to her home. She had originally planned to get something to eat for Jang Hoon, but when she opened the refrigerator, she found only bottled water. She could only order takeout to ease the awkwardness. At that moment, four hungry people were standing outside a fried chicken shop, enviously watching the people inside eating fried chicken. These four people were Ji-soo and others who had come to South Korea through the World Military Games. Behind them, Wan-bok quietly walked away, having just arrived. The group had limited funds for the event and could only suppress their desires. While Siri and Jang Hoon were eating fried chicken, Siri's second older brother, Si-hang, suddenly arrived. Siri was so scared that she quickly hid Jang Hoon in the room. Si-hang came to find Siri to threaten her with the fact that she had been in North Korea while she was missing. He told her not to try to take his position. What seemed like harsh words revealed the truth that they wanted to keep her from ever returning. Siri firmly etched everything they had done into her memory. Si-hang's older sister, realizing the truth had been exposed, hurriedly pulled him away. The sharp-eyed woman noticed Jang Hoon's shoes as they left. She began to suspect that Siri was hiding someone in the house. Jang Hoon realized for the first time that the seemingly happy Siri had been living such a tragic life in South Korea. He could only give Siri a silent hug. He told her that the most important thing in life was to remember the people she loved, not the people she hated. On the other side, Ji-soo and the others, struggling to make ends meet, had to spend the night at a sauna, watching Kwanbom exchange his bracelet for a variety of foods. Everyone was eager to try it out. In the end, Ji-soo's exfoliation service cost them 130,000 won. After Cheon-kan got into trouble, everyone associated with him began to be held accountable and purged. This included the business that had sheltered Soon-jun in North Korea, putting both Soon-jun and Mr. Sen in danger. Mr. Sen threw Soon-chun's passport to him as he was being arrested, and told him to figure out a way to escape on his own. Just as he was at a loss, he received a call from Sudan. Sudan was having a gathering with a few so-called friends. Everyone was mocking her for not being married, forcing her to use Soon-jun to show off her charm. Watching Sudan being picked up by handsome men in the pouring rain, her friends felt devastated by their failure. Soon-jun sought help from Sudan. Sudan temporarily took him in to stay in the apartment she shared with Jang Hoon. With nowhere else to go, Soon-jun had found temporary shelter. While eating instant noodles, Sudan made the first move on Soon-jun. This made Soon-jun, who already liked Sudan, fall into a state of confusion. He couldn't sleep all night, until Sudan's call in the morning made him excited again. Seeing Sudan already driving to the apartment building, their sweet yet tragic love story finally began. On the other side, Siri took Jang Hoon to the mall to buy clothes. The salesperson couldn't stop praising Jang Hoon for his good looks. Meanwhile, Cheon-kan, who had secretly passed by Siri's office, had already noticed that Jang Hoon had come to Korea to track him down. At that moment, Jang Hoon received a call from M.R.Woo, who informed him that he had arranged to meet Cheon-kan at a designated location. Jang Hoon didn't want Siri to follow him into danger. He planned to capture Cheon-kan and then secretly leave Korea. He arrived at the location agreed upon with Mr. Woo, but found it empty. Following the ringing of his phone, he encountered assassins lying in wait. He had no choice but to fight them off. In the process, his shoulder was slashed by a dagger. After successfully escaping, he saw a text message from Siri. He tried to call her back but couldn't get through. He immediately realized that Siri might be in danger. He rushed back desperately. On the way, he received a call from Cheo Kong, who had used Siri's phone to contact him. It turned out that Cheo Kong had never left Siri's company. After figuring out Siri's work schedule, he hid in her car and waited. Siri, who had learned from Jeng-hoon to knock on the car hood before driving, accidentally discovered Cheo Kong hiding in the car. She tried to pretend she hadn't noticed and leave the parking lot. The Cheo Kong chased after her like a mad dog. She had no choice but to run away. She accidentally dropped her phone on the ground. With no other options, she hid in the nearby surveillance room, watching helplessly as Cheo Kong closed in. Fortunately, Jeng-hoon's call caught Cheo Kang's attention. She finally had the chance to move and hide in the electrical room. Watching Jeng-hoon rush over but being threatened by Cheo Kong using her, Siri mustered up the courage to cut off all the power in the parking lot. In the darkness, she shouted to Jeng-hoon not to trust Cheo Kong. Jeng-hoon found Siri by following her voice. With the security patrol arriving in the basement, Cheo Kang's plan was foiled. This allowed the two of them to narrowly escape. Back home, Siri called a private doctor to bandage Jeng-hoon's wounds. She told the doctor to keep Jeng-hoon's secret. However, the doctor turned around and told Si-han. Siri told Jeng-hoon to wait until he was fully recovered before going out. In North Korea, he couldn't fight Cheo Kong on his own. Once back in South Korea, Cheo Kong wouldn't be in charge. She brought group leader Han to the place where Jeng-hoon had been ambushed and bought all the surrounding shops. At that moment, the news on TV reported that South Korean police had discovered the channel through which Jeng-hoon had smuggled himself into South Korea. Jeng-hoon's whereabouts had been exposed to the South Korean National Intelligence Service. Siri gathered all the shop tenants together to negotiate with them. If the tenants could identify the people who set up the ambush for Jeng-hoon, she would waive their rent for the entire year. If they found Cheo Kong, the discount would continue. The faster the information was reported, the greater the reward. She used her financial power to make all the tenants submit to her and work for her. After handling the ambush incident involving Jeng-hoon, she found the person who most wanted her to return safely, her insurance broker, Soo-chan. Although Siri returned safely to South Korea, Soo-chan was still laid off by the company. Siri was grateful for everything he had done for her during this time. If it weren't for his persistence, no one would have discovered Siri, so she offered him 3 times his original annual salary to become her third assistant. The North Korean 5 returned to the sauna to report on the day's intelligence gathering. Wan Bok, skilled in eavesdropping, gathered a pile of gossip about Siri's company. She soon unexpectedly became a part-time delivery driver at a fried chicken shop. To enjoy the fried chicken given to him by the manager, he secretly cut off the store's phone, preventing customers from placing orders by phone. And that customer was Jeng-hoon. He became the first person to miss Jeng-hoon, but he earned a little pocket money for the group. Ju-mo, who went to the internet cafe to collect intelligence, watched Korean dramas all day and came up empty-handed. The last one to go to Cheongdong, Kwangbom, only came back with a pile of Town Scout business cards. After a day of hard work, the group had nothing to show for it. On the North Korean side, the military minister remained in constant contact with Cheo Kong. Cheo Kong informed him of Jeng-hoon's whereabouts in South Korea, giving him another leverage against Jung-ryul. Their ultimate goal was to bring Siri back to North Korea to testify against Jung-ryul and bring down the head of the General Political Bureau. Soon-jun called Sudan for help. His apartment had been without electricity for a day. He was sick from the heat. Sudan didn't want to help him, but couldn't bear to see him suffering, so she took some food from her home and sneaked to his apartment to assist him. Sudan carefully cooked porridge for him, but added a bit too much salt. The extremely salty porridge Sudan cooked reminded Soon-jun of his past. Although Sudan had already investigated him and knew he had defrauded Si-hang of his money in South Korea, but Soon-jun still told her the truth about his past. It turned out that his father had lost his company when he was a child after being deceived by a close friend. The entire family was forced to immigrate to the UK. However, they couldn't adapt to the local diet, so they had to add salt to plain rice porridge for flavor. His father passed away shortly after eating a bowl of salty porridge. His mother remarried. He went to boarding school alone. It felt like the whole world had abandoned him. The one who ruined his family was Siri's father, so he vowed to take revenge on their family. He had planned to marry into their family and take everything from them. But Siri, who had been as unhappy as him since childhood, was too smart. She saw through his plan immediately. He had no choice but to declare his plan a failure. He then shifted his target to Si-hang. He successfully swindled all of Si-hang's money. He was then pursued relentlessly by Si-hang and fled to North Korea. But even after achieving victory, he felt no happiness. Perhaps returning the money would allow him to live out the rest of his life in peace. The idea of returning the money was immediately opposed by Sudan. Mentioning Siri made her furious. She demanded that Soon-jun recover his health and return to South Korea to destroy Siri's entire entire family. As she grew more enraged, she opened the cabinet and took out a bottle of alcohol, beginning to drink. This frightened the ailing Soon Jun into a state of anxiety. After drinking the entire bottle, the two ended up sleeping together in the same bed. Meanwhile, Mingnan was deeply concerned about Sudan spending the night outside. She asked her high-ranking official brother to investigate all of Soon Chun's information, because the company's new product launch event would have many people attending. Siri told Jeng Hoon to dress up and stay by her side. When she saw the watch on Jeng Hoon's wrist, she immediately realized it was the one she had wanted to give him earlier. She never expected it to be the watch Jeng Hoon had given to his brother. The 5 members of the North Korean group learned about Siri's new product launch event and decided to go to the exhibition hall to find Siri and Jeng Hoon. The group, led by Jisoo, disguised themselves as wealthy people and entered the mall to shop. Their strange behavior made the sales staff think they were stalkers, and they were about to notify security. This was overheard by Wanbok, who was hiding behind them. Wanbok quickly found the others and told them to retreat immediately. They ran away as fast as they could. However, they found Yun Tom sleeping soundly on a bed. They woke him up and ran away together. Yun Tom was so anxious that he ran away without even putting on his shoes. The security guards tried to return his shoes, but were mistaken for pursuers. Their escape was witnessed by Jeng Hoon, who was taking a walk. By the time they reached the park, Jeng Hoon had followed them with Yun Tong's shoes. The group finally found Jeng Hoon in this unfamiliar place. Siri arrived at the park upon Jeng Hoon's notification. They were reunited with their friends whom they had missed day and night. Siri brought them all to her apartment. Everyone marveled at how happy Siri's life was. Meanwhile, in the village, because the major had been arrested and imprisoned, Yeon-ae, who had become a key surveillance target, could only lock herself and her children at home and avoid contact with anyone. The women's group, fearing that associating with Yeon-ae would bring trouble, kept their distance from her. However, they all kept their concern for her in their hearts. At night, everyone secretly brought things from their homes to support her. The people's class leader even chopped a pile of firewood for her, just to keep her warm in the cold winter. This made Yeon-ae realize that having them was the greatest happiness of her life. Late at night, Siri overheard Jeng Hoon and Wanbok's conversation. She realized they must leave before the military games ended. Their separation was once again imminent. This weighed heavily on her heart. She couldn't let herself ruin his life. The next morning, she told Jeng Hoon to leave without worrying. She could accept his sudden disappearance. She would wait for him in another place, hoping he might reappear someday. Siri's mother and father revealed at breakfast that she had been in North Korea. Her mother even revealed that Si-hang had always known that Siri was in North Korea and had paid someone to prevent her from returning. This reminded Janpeng of Si-hang's reaction when Suchin and group leader Han had come to him with the recording. He began to suspect that the story might be true. After breakfast, Siri's mother found her, hoping to explain the situation with Si-hang, but Siri couldn't forget the scene of her mother abandoning her. At that moment, she felt as though she shouldn't have been born into this world. Her heartbreaking words left her mother speechless. Everyone now knew the deep rift between mother and daughter. Cheo Kong met Si-hang through Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu stated that both parties shared the same goal. Cooperation was the only way to achieve mutual benefit. However, upon learning that Siri's life was in danger after being taken back to North Korea, Si-hang decided to abandon her collaboration with Cheo Kong. Ironically, Siri's second sister-in-law secretly contacted Cheo Kong after Si-hang left. She revealed to Cheo Kong where Siri was staying. This gave Cheo Kong another opportunity to act. When Siri returned home, she found the house completely empty. She cried alone in the vast living room. Just as she was crying, the light suddenly came on. It turned out that the others had not left. They had come to help celebrate Siri's birthday and give her a surprise. This left the emotionally overwhelmed Siri at a loss. She could only cry and run away, because she was also afraid that she would have expectations for future birthdays. She had been alone for so long. She was too afraid of losing everything. It was Jeng Hoon's silent embrace that gave her the confidence to face happiness again. She told Jeng Hoon that she was afraid that if he stayed by her side for too long, he would be rejected by the North Korean people. She hoped Jeng Hoon could return safely to his own life, and not worrying about her, she would use every means at her disposal in South Korea to protect herself from harm. At that moment, Cheo Kong had arrived at the bottom of Siri's apartment building and witnessed everything that had happened, including Wanbok's betrayal and his joining Jeng Hoon's side. He had a new plan. Siri calmed down and returned to the apartment to spend the happiest birthday of her life with everyone. After the birthday party, Jeng Hoon gave Siri a pair of matching rings. Ming-en, who had not found Sudan all day, was forced to go to the apartment to look for her. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Soon-jun holding a bowl of soup. She hurried into the room and woke up Sudan, who was still drunk. The three of them were having dinner. Mingnan asked Soon-jun about his background. Soon-jun admitted for the first time that he likes Sudan. Plus, Mingnan's flattery made Mingnan fall for Soon-jun. She even started encouraging Sudan to give up Jang-hoon and find someone else to marry. To repay the help the 5 people from North Korea had given her, Siri decided to give them gifts. She took out her credit card with no spending limit and let them buy whatever they wanted. In the end, they all bought clothes they liked. Siri's second sister-in-law bribed the cleaner at Siri's apartment. From the cleaner's information, she was even more certain that the man hiding in Siri's home was no ordinary person. She convened another secret shareholders meeting. She still wanted to take over Siri's company and ruin her completely. But this time, Siri's mother intervened to stop her, warning her not to go too far. They already knew everything she and Si-hang had done, especially Siri's father, who wanted her to go home with Si-hang to explain everything. Siri continued to enjoy her dates with Jang-hoon before he left. That evening, during their dinner, Cheo-kong found Wan-bok smoking alone. He threatened him with the fact that he had killed Moo-hoo, forcing him to continue working for him and to think about his family. They were all under surveillance, leaving Wan-bok no chance to resist. He wanted Wan-bok to face reality. The next day, under Siri's arrangement, Ju-mo finally had lunch with his idol, Cho Ji-woo. He was so excited that he felt like he had no regrets in life. Back home, Si-hang was interrogated by his father. The angry chairman was preparing to reconvene the board of directors and remove him from his position as the family business operator. Hearing that her husband was about to lose everything, the second wife desperately showed the chairman the photos of Soon-jun and Siri taken in North Korea. She used the fact that Si-hang had been deceived by Soon-jun to portray Siri as Soon-chun's accomplice. The chairman told them not to play tricks. He said they should investigate and find out the truth themselves. However, Si-hang's true intention was to use this opportunity to buy himself some time. Knowing that he was about to lose everything, he contacted Cheo-kong and offered to cooperate. He only hoped that Cheo-kong could make Siri disappear completely. This time, he no longer cared about Siri's life or death. He even helped Cheo-kong call Siri and deceive her. He told her to come home immediately. This was to lure Siri out of the house. Cheo-kong also learned from Wan-bok's eavesdropping that Jang-hoon and the others were about to leave Korea. However, Mr. Woo had already arranged for Jang-hoon to be met alone. He intended to carry out his plan to ensure Jang-hoon could never return home. Siri drove toward her father's house. Along the way, she suddenly encountered several cars blocking her path. A group of thugs got out of the cars. It seemed they were going to execute her on the spot. As the thugs approached Siri's car, the door suddenly opened. 4 people got out of the car. It was Jisoo and the others. It turned out that Wan-bok had already told Jang-hoon about Cheo-kong forcing him, so they gave up the opportunity to return to North Korea and instead lured Cheo-kong into a trap. They made Cheo-kong believe they had already returned to North Korea. Only Jang-hoon was left alone. Si-hang's collaboration with Cheo-kong had also been discovered. The moment Wan-bok informed Cheo-kong that Siri had already departed, the initiative for the entire plan had already fallen into Jang-hoon's hands. After Jisoo and the others worked together to eliminate the thugs surrounding Siri, they headed to assist the lone Jang-hoon. Siri found the previous tenant to support Jang-hoon. During the fight, Cheo-kong realized he wasn't a match for Jang-hoon and his group. He took Wan-bok hostage and escaped. Unwilling to give up, he hid behind a car after leaving the warehouse to ambush Jang-hoon, who was chasing after him. Siri, who had witnessed all of Cheo-kong's actions, didn't want Jang-hoon to be in danger. She decisively drove the car toward Jang-hoon and used her body to block the bullet fired by Cheo-kong. The bullet pierced the car window and struck her. Jang-hoon, suppressing his grief, fired a shot at Cheo-kong, but to save Siri, he couldn't continue firing to kill Cheo-kong. Wan-bok tried to kill Cheo-kong, but ultimately spared him out of mercy, allowing Cheo-kong to escape. Siri was rushed to the hospital and underwent surgery all night. Jang-hoon waited alone nearby. Thanks to the doctor's efforts, Siri successfully completed the surgery and survived the critical phase, but remains in a coma. Everyone was worried about whether Siri would wake up again. The 5 North Koreans, constrained by their identities, could only wait outside the hospital. Only Jang-hoon remained outside the war as a bodyguard. But this silent vigil aroused the suspicion of Siri's second sister-in-law. After all, she and Si-hang knew that Siri had been hiding a man at home. They feared that their actions would be exposed. They found an excuse to dismiss Jang-hoon. He could no longer stay by the hospital room as a private bodyguard. He could only wait silently downstairs at the hospital. Mr. Woo saved his life to recover the remaining payment Cheo-kong owed him. After days of unconsciousness, Siri finally regained consciousness. The first thing she did upon waking was to have Jang-hoon return to his post. Seeing the conscious Siri, Jang-hoon's heart, which had been hanging in suspense, finally relaxed slightly. He could no longer suppress his emotions and finally said to Siri, "I love you." Words he had longed to say. This scene was clearly witnessed by Jisoo and the others outside the war. It turned out that after Jang-hoon was fired, Wan-bok was afraid that no one would look after Siri and something might happen to her, so he disguised himself as a janitor and sneaked into the hospital room to secretly install a listening device. Wan-bok gave Siri an important recording and hoped she would listen to it herself. This recording was Siri's mother's confession to her. She had always wanted to apologize to Siri, but had never had the chance to say it. She only hoped that Siri would wake up safely. This recording made Siri realize that she still had her mother's love, and cleared up the misunderstanding between her and her mother. Siri began to feel the warmth of home again. Soon-jun couldn't stand seeing Sudan so depressed because of Jang-hoon. He risked his life to meet Sudan at the bridge where they last saw each other. He apologized to Sudan with all sincerity. He hoped Sudan wouldn't continue to be sad because of Jang-hoon. Jang-hoon left Sudan not because she wasn't attractive enough. Sudan had many qualities that others didn't have. He didn't think Sudan was aloof. On the contrary, he found her adorable. Amid Soon-chan's heartfelt praise, Sudan finally opened her heart and broke free from the emotional bondage Jang-hoon had placed on her. She gave Soon-jun a passionate kiss. The South Korean National Intelligence Service had analyzed the tunnel route Jang-hoon used to enter South Korea and identified Cheol-kong and Jang-hoon as the individuals who had entered South Korea through that tunnel. They officially launched an investigation and arrest operation against Cheol-kong and Jang-hoon. Cheol-kong, who refused to give up, continued to maintain contact with the military minister. He sent some evidence of Jang-hoon's whereabouts in South Korea to the military minister. He stated that he would return to North Korea soon with all the evidence. He planned to help the military minister destroy the director of the General Political Bureau. The military minister used Jang-hoon's photo, Seoul, to threaten Jung-ryul. However, Jung-ryul was already aware of everything. He easily refuted the military minister's claims by citing a state-secret mission, leaving the military minister temporarily unable to take any action against him. South Korean National Intelligence Service agents had already discovered a connection between Siri and Jang-hoon. They found Siri and asked her to cooperate with the investigation. After careful consideration, Siri publicly revealed the recording of Wan-bok eavesdropping on Si-hang's conversation with his wife and Cheol-kong, exposing everything Si-hang had done, causing the chairman to lose all trust in him, and immediately demanding he resign all his positions and disappear from the family forever. The National Intelligence Service also arrested Si-hang according to the law and demanded he cooperate with the investigation. Soon-jun finally faced his downfall because he had not followed his agreement with Si-hang. Si-hang had already arranged for people to kill him. The man who came to the apartment to arrest him was Mr. Sen, who had been collaborating with him. He fought desperately to escape but couldn't get out of the apartment. He had no choice but to follow Mr. Sen. Siri's second sister-in-law refused to give up. She took advantage of the moment when no one was paying attention and called Cheol-kong. Cheol-kong told her that Jang-hoon and the others were all North Korean soldiers. To recover her losses, she directly reported this information to the National Intelligence Service. This put Jang-hoon and the others in danger. Jang-hoon found Cheol-kong and Mr. Wu's hiding place through Siri's tenant. He instructed the North Korean 5-man team to stay at the hospital to protect Siri. He went alone to the agreed location to capture Cheol-kong. Mr. Wu saw Jang-hoon chasing after him and immediately abandoned Cheol-kong and fled alone. Jang-hoon found Cheol-kong hiding, but before he could act, he was already surrounded by National Intelligence Service agents. If Jang-hoon chose to fire, he would be killed by the National Intelligence Service. Cheol-kong knew he had no way out. He decided to die with Jang-hoon. He pretended to fire his gun, prompting the SWAT team outside to shoot him dead. Before dying, he tried to sow discord between Jang-hoon and his father, wanting Jang-hoon to believe his father was a bad person. He used his own death to almost destroy Jang-hoon's hope of returning home. Desperate, Jang-hoon was about to shoot himself, but a final moment of clarity made him lower his gun. He allowed the National Intelligence Service to arrest him. The 5 North Koreans in the hospital were also arrested by the National Intelligence Service. Jisoo tried to use himself as bait to help the others escape, but he walked into a dead end. In the end, all 5 were arrested by National Intelligence Service agents. Siri, witnessing everyone's arrest, disregarded her injuries and rushed out of the ward to explain to the agents. However, the agents did not give her a chance to explain. They still took the 5 away from the hospital. Siri, already weakened, suffered a wound infection due to her grief and once again found herself in danger. Jisoo and the others, who had been arrested, underwent interrogation by the National Intelligence Service that night. Jisoo tried to pretend to be brave during the interrogation, but the lie detector recorded all his panic. Afterwards, when he went to the National Intelligence Service's cafeteria, he learned from Yuntong that the National Intelligence Service had already known their basic information. Only Jang-hoon remained silent, unwilling to talk to the National Intelligence Service. Si-hang continued to make his final desperate attempts in front of his father, to shift all the blame onto Siri, and convince his father to abandon Siri and restore his own position as heir. Unfortunately, the chairman had already completely given up on him, and would no longer give him any hope. Mr. Sen had accepted money to escort Soon-jun back to South Korea. However, during the time he spent with Soon-jun, he had developed feelings for him. He couldn't bear to see him return to South Korea and be killed. So, while everyone else was asleep, he secretly let Soon-jun escape. After escaping from the hotel, Soon-jun realized he had arrived at a market near the border. He hadn't found a way to escape yet. The people chasing him had already caught up. In a panic, he could only hide temporarily behind a stall where some children were playing. The children took pity on him and helped him evade capture. Listening to the children sing a nursery rhyme, he recalled his own tragic childhood. Now, in a strange place, he found himself in danger again and couldn't help but cry. Perhaps it was because he could empathize with them. He couldn't bear to see these children, who had lost their loved ones, continue to suffer. He gave them a bundle of money, hoping they would use it to change their lives. This child was the same one Siri had helped at the beginning. Now they were helping Soon-jun, which was also a way of helping Siri repay Soon-jun for his assistance. The South Korean National Intelligence Service retrieved all the videos of Jang-hoon's activities in South Korea, but found that he had been doing good deeds the entire time, with no signs of any wrongdoing. They couldn't find anything incriminating. The North Korean 5-member group also refused to cooperate with the investigation. This left the National Intelligence Service in a bind. To protect Siri, Jang-hoon eventually decided to speak up. He revealed that after Siri fell into North Korea, he discovered she was South Korean. To lure her out, he funded her escape from North Korea. He pretended to develop feelings for her. He took all the blame for his actions. The National Intelligence Service agents found Siri to seek the truth. However, they received the exact opposite answer. With no other options, they had no choice but to confront the two directly. Jang-hoon, in order to protect Siri, continued to act cold-hearted. Every word pierced Siri's heart. No matter how much Siri pleaded, he completely suppressed his emotions. Worried and heartbroken, Siri fainted as she was leaving. She was rushed to the hospital for treatment due to an infection from her wounds. Siri once again fell into a life-threatening condition. After wandering around outside for a day, Soon-jun finally made his way into the village. Seeing the group of women in the village gave him hope of being saved. After going hungry for a day, he finally got to eat his fill at Younghee's house. After finishing his meal, he went alone to Jang-hoon's house to seek refuge. On the way, he happened to receive a call from Sudan. With no other choice, he had to tell Sudan his location. He wanted to ask Sudan to help him one last time. Upon arriving at Jang-hoon's house, Sudan learned of Soon-chun's predicament. She had intended to use her influence to protect Soon-jun, but Soon-jun didn't want to trouble her anymore. He had already purchased a ticket to return to England. He planned to head to the airport tomorrow during a lull in the security checks. He hoped Sudan could help him reach the airport safely. He wanted to leave North Korea with dignity and return in glory. He wanted to reappear before Sudan as a good person. By then, if Sudan's engagement to Jang-hoon had been dissolved, he hoped Sudan would give him a chance. Sudan felt for the first time what it was like to truly be attracted to someone. She felt for the first time what it was like to be liked by someone. She didn't want Soon-jun to leave, but at that moment, she couldn't bring herself to say it. She stood up to leave alone, but Soon-jun held her back. He put the ring he had just redeemed from the pawn shop on Sudan's finger. It was the first and last time he formally confessed his feelings to Sudan. He hoped Sudan would remember that there was always someone who loved her. The National Intelligence Service successfully decrypted Cho Kang's computer. The staff showed Jang-hoon the email Cho Kang had sent to the Minister of Defense. They told Jang-hoon that he should not worry about his father, but about himself. Because he was in South Korea, he had no idea how others would use him to frame his father. They hoped that Jang-hoon would cooperate with the National Intelligence Service. During their conversation, they received news that Siri was in critical condition. In order to persuade Jang-hoon, they specially approved his visit to the hospital to see Siri. Betrayal in North Korea learned that Jang-hoon had been arrested. In order to rescue Jang-hoon, he could only propose to South Korea that they exchange prisoners. The South Korean side felt that this proposal was more advantageous to them, considering that Jang-hoon and the others had not committed any acts harmful to South Korea. After discussing it in a meeting, they decided to accept North Korea's proposal to exchange prisoners. The Minister of Military Affairs opposed this decision. He hopes that Betrayal will consider the issue from the perspective of the country and directly threatens Betrayal with Jang-hoon. Betrayal symbolically presents evidence of his collusion with Cho Kang, hoping that he will consider the issue from multiple perspectives, forcing the military minister to compromise, but still demanding that he lead and be responsible for this repatriation operation. To save Jang-hoon, Betrayal had no choice but to temporarily agree to the military minister's demands. The next day, Sudan successfully delivered Soon-jun to the airport. After they parted ways, Sudan was kidnapped on her way back. back, the kidnappers demanded that Soon-jun go alone to exchange Sudan. Even when Soon-jun revealed Sudan's identity, the kidnappers showed no fear. After standing there deep in thought for a long time, Soon-jun, for the sake of the person he loved, finally tore up the plane ticket in his hand and went alone to the place where the kidnappers were. Sudan never imagined that Soon-jun would risk his life to confront the kidnappers with a gun. He disregarded his own safety and shot all the kidnappers surrounding Sudan. However, he missed one kidnapper. By the time he realized it, it was already too late. He was shot in the abdomen by the kidnappers, but he used his last ounce of strength to shoot and kill the kidnappers. He rescued Sudan from danger. Heartbroken, Sudan didn't dare to delay. She quickly called an ambulance to take Soon-jun to the hospital. However, the kidnappers' bullets had hit Soon-chun's vital organs, and he had lost too much blood. Soon-jun ultimately lost his life on the way to the hospital. Sudan lost the first person who had ever loved her. He was her true first love. Siri survived thanks to the doctor's efforts. She learned from her mother that Jang-hoon was about to be deported back to his country. She didn't want to go and distract Jang-hoon. They could part ways peacefully. But when her mother told her that Jang-hoon had been granted a pardon after learning she was in a coma due to sepsis and had been by her side the entire time until she regained consciousness, he quietly followed the National Intelligence Service away. The overwhelming longing in her heart drove her to decide to say her final goodbye to her beloved. Her mother drove her there at full speed. Finally, they arrived just as Jang-hoon was about to cross the border. Jang-hoon broke free from his restraints at all costs and ran towards Siri despite the risk of war breaking out at any moment. They embraced each other tightly and said their final goodbyes with deep affection. They urged each other to live well and to be happy forever. Then, they were separated by the staff. Jang-hoon set off on his journey back home. Siri silently watched her lover leave. Jun Ryul received news that Jang-hoon had crossed the border. He knew the military minister would not spare Jang-hoon, so he decided to go personally to bring Jang-hoon home. Jang-hoon's mother placed poison on the table, telling Jun Ryul not to worry about the family. If anything happened to them, she would follow them in death. No one would ever be able to destroy their family again. The military minister had no intention of letting Jang-hoon go. He changed his route back to the country and took Jang-hoon and the others to a remote location. He planned to execute them in secret on charges of treason. Jang-hoon wanted to protect Jisoo and the others behind him, but the military minister didn't care whether they were guilty or not. Just as the military minister ordered his men to fire, Jun Ryul arrived at the scene with his personal guards. He had all the evidence of the military minister's crimes. Plus, he had witnessed everything with his own eyes this time. It was impossible for the military minister to kill his own son. The military minister was willing to fight to the death with Jang-hoon, but Jun Ryul didn't give him the chance, firing directly to end his life. He then took all the men the military minister had brought with him under his command. On the way home, Jang-hoon finally felt the long-lost love of a father. His mother, seeing Jang-hoon return home, finally let go of the worrying that had been weighing on her heart. She no longer had to grieve over the loss of her child. The family finally emerged from the whirlpool they had been caught in. Wan-bok, who returned to the village, was reunited with his wife and children, and was completely freed from Cheo Kang's threats. Finally, he could face his life head-on. Sudan, who had lost everything, locked herself in her room and grieved alone. Only her mother and uncle were by her side. After much deliberation, she finally decided to use her influence. She wanted to avenge her lover. She first captured Mr. Sen and demanded he reveal the names of everyone who had harmed Soon-ju. She would ensure that those still in Korea would not survive. Then she sent all the evidence of Si-hang's crimes through Mr. Sen to Siri, so that Siri could personally send Si-hang to prison. After capturing Mr. Woo, Sudan teamed up with Siri for the first time to put an end to their shared experiences. Upon returning home, Siri looked at everything Jang-hoon had prepared for her and shed tears of sorrow once more. But when she received another text message from Jang-hoon, her life seemed to regain hope. It turned out that the section chief from the National Intelligence Service had taught Jang-hoon how to use his phone to send timed text messages. Before leaving, Jang-hoon had set the messages to be sent automatically over the course of a year, to automatically send her pre-written messages at different times each day. The two lived in sync through the reminders, even without seeing each other, adding a touch of anticipation and beauty to their days. Mingnen personally went to Jang-hoon's home according to Sudan's wishes to annul the engagement between Sudan and Jang-hoon. Though both families knew what had happened, they did not blame each other. They simply showed each other the utmost respect. Sudan came to Jang-hoon's house to see him. She didn't come specifically to find Jang-hoon. She just wanted to come to this place to find her memories of Soon-ju. In order not to make Jang-hoon feel guilty, she hid the truth about Soon-chun's death. She just fixed Jang-hoon's camera and returned it to him, and told him about the fate-related items in the camera. It turned out that every place they had passed through in Switzerland had traces of Siri. The destinies of the three of them seemed intertwined from the very beginning. Siri was not only her rival in love, but but also the person who taught her to use sweets to ease her sorrow. She came to see Jang-hoon again simply to put an end to their unfulfilled lives. Jang-hoon ended his military career at a banquet hosted by the women's team. The next captain would be Jisoo. This left the women's team heartbroken, as they would no longer see the handsome man. Siri received the last text message Jang-hoon sent her. They agreed to meet again at a place covered in snowdrops. Without the family fortune to fight over, Siri had a happy family life. She used her family's business to fund a project at the Swiss Music Academy to train outstanding pianists. Because Switzerland was where she met Jang-hoon, and where snowdrops bloom, she visits Switzerland every year when the academy holds its piano recital, hoping to one day welcome Jang-hoon, the pianist, there. Sudin overcame the grief of losing Soon-jun and embarked on the path to becoming a strong, independent woman. Carrying her cello, she set out on a journey to rediscover her music, determined to live a more fulfilling life. With Jang-hoon's help, Wan-bok left the village Jan, went to Pyongyang to become a radio operator. It was still a job that involved listening to sounds, but she no longer had to hide in the shadows as someone everyone despised. After 2 years of waiting, Siri never gave up. She tried paragliding again. In the moment she failed to land, it felt like the gears of fate were turning once more. Jang-hoon finally appeared before her again 2 years later as she landed. The two embraced tightly once more, to release the love they had missed for 2 years. The film ends here. If you're interested, please like and follow us. See you next time.